Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to this week's episode of the Montpelier Happy Hour here on WVEW LP Brattleboro, your community radio station. If you are new to the show, this is the show where we talk about how everything in Montpelier shakes out for the rest of us. I'm Olga Peters, and I am speaking with Representative Mollie S. Burke. She represents Wyndham 8, which is I always look at it as like South Brattleboro. How do you define
Southeast.
it? Southeast. Okay. So she's one of three reps from Brattleboro. She also serves on the House Committee on Transportation. She chairs the House Sexual Harassment Prevention Panel and is the co-chair of the Climate Caucus. Very busy up there in Montpelier, Mollie. Did I miss anything?
I think that's it for now.
For now. I always feel a little bit sorry when I talk to reps right after the session because I can imagine there's just a little bit of mushy brain. What happened to time, getting back into your old life happening here.
That's true.
Well, Mollie, I'm curious for you with this session. There was a lot of things that got a lot of attention. The ed bill, housing got a lot of attention. But for you, what do you feel were some of the highlights of this particular legislative session?
Well, Olga, I think I've written many times. I've just finished my 17th year in the legislature. And my inspiration to run for the legislature was because way back in 2008 and way before that, I've been concerned about climate change.
Mm-hmm.
It's been really on my mind. I did my MFA thesis on a relationship between art and how the artist engages with society. And I did projects, I don't know if you remember, I had shows on exhibiting a poster exhibition, inviting people to, to produce work that was based on how do you deal with this? What are some things you can do? And I had a couple of, I think 3 exhibits at Amy's, invited different artists, and that was part of my master's program.
Yes.
So I've been doing this work before I got to the legislature. And so when I got to the legislature, I was like, okay, this is another opportunity for me to figure out, what can we do? How can we cut our emissions? And I was particularly interested in transportation emissions because transportation accounts for the greater majority, somewhere around 40% of Vermont's greenhouse gases, more than thermal, a little bit more than thermal, and certainly more than electricity. Mm-hmm. And so I requested to be on the transportation committee. People were like, why do you want to be on that committee? It's just a public works committee. I said, no, it's no, this is it. This is where it is because we have to cut our greenhouse gases. So that was sort of and when I got to the legislature, I was so surprised. Hardly anybody was talking about climate change. I said, Are you kidding me? Some people were, but it wasn't a big topic. Now it's just sort of like, okay, climate change, it's part of the lexicon, it's part of the conversation. So I had some years there where I was like, what can I do here? I did an anti-idling bill. I worked on a few things that pleased me because they were related to that. And then along came some federal money, and there was sort of a convergence of interest in the Global Warming Solutions Act in 2020 meant that we had to mandated that we meet our comprehensive energy goals, the comprehensive energy plan. So out of that developed the climate action plan, and out of that so the administration out of that had to start taking climate change seriously. And therefore then there was a lot of money around at that time, and we had some great programs that our committee oversaw in terms of giving subsidies to help people buy electric vehicles and to help people, very low income people, program that was started by Sue Minter, at former transportation secretary at Capstone Community Action, to help very low income people buy fuel efficient used cars. And it was just like the uptick was great. We were starting to see the increase in our number of electric vehicles in the state. And it was really sort of exciting time, 3 or 4 years there. We put in some other programs called Replace Your Ride, where if your car was 10 years old, but it was still inspectable, you could trade it in and get $5,000 because you were taking a internal combustion engine car off the road. So all of these things sort of happened. And then all of a sudden, last year, we ran out of money. The programs ran out of money. The state had applied, the Agency of Natural Resources Climate Action Office. There's an actual climate action office in the Agency of Natural Resources, and they had applied for a grant. This is pre new administration. They had applied for a grant that was going to help us. Well, it was going to help fund our electric vehicle programs. We needed some millions of dollars to do that. And it was going to, there was also a program that accompanied that, well, that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, to called the National Electric Vehicle Initiative, which was to put a fast charging station within 5 miles of every interstate exit. So that was like very exciting. That, of course, has been completely wiped away. The state had some RFPs out, and they had to withdraw their RFPs because the money was just taken away because the administration doesn't want to have anything to do with climate, which to me is, it's, well, we don't have to go into that, to the what they're putting at what's being put at risk right now with the policies that are completely scrubbing climate change from websites. Even, I mean, so anyway, what I'm saying is that they had this grant that they applied for that was going to help with our electric vehicle incentives, and right before the new administration came in, they found out they didn't get the grant. So that was a real disappointment, because that meant, and we knew that we didn't have the money in the transportation budget to do that. So a couple of things, those two things happened. We didn't get that grant for the incentives, and the administration walked back the National NEVI program, National Electric Vehicle Initiative. That's it. So, so I went into this session. The session before this, with Sarah Coffey as chair, we had done a lot. We had also gotten the state treasurer involved in looking at whether Vermont could join with New York State or some other jurisdiction in a cap and invest program that would have helped also give us money, and akin to the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is the same kind of program but with electricity. And so there were just some exciting things happening. And there wasn't really anything exciting happening this year because there was no money. We had a new chair. Sarah was gone, and there just wasn't a lot of opportunity. So I went into the session thinking that I really wanted to get the Mileage Smart program going. That's a program for very low income people to help them. That was going to be $3 or $4 million, and we just did not have the money. So that was another disappointment. So the one thing that we sort of related that we did do is that there was some money left in another program called Electrify Your Fleet, which is where a company could decide, they have a fleet of cars and they wanted to buy several cars or 5 cars or whatever to increase the efficiency of their fleet and save money. By the way, using electricity for transportation saved quite a bit of money. So, but akin to like $1.50 a gallon of gas. So we did, so we took money from that. That program wasn't really being used very much, and it was like, $400,000 left in it. We took some money. Drive Electric Vermont is a great organization that helps people buy electric vehicles, teaches people what you need to look for, how you can, what are the different models, what are the incentives, are there any federal? I think there might be still some federal incentives happening. And we decided, and they were asking for money, which we didn't have. They wanted some money to continue their education programs. They're a great organization. So we managed to take the money out of the Electrify Your Fleet program, most of it, and put it into Drive Electric Vermont. And that felt like a little bit of a win, a little bit of something that would keep something going. The other thing that we did is that people who now, when you register an electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, you have to pay a higher registration fee.
Hmm.
That just happened last year because the people have been saying, well, they're not, the electric vehicles are not paying their fair share, they're not paying the gas tax. And the Agency of Transportation said, well, it doesn't really make sense to do that until they represent about 15% of all the vehicles on the road. And we're not quite there yet, but almost. So what they did was they doubled the fee. If you have pay a registration fee, you pay double. And if you have that's for an all-electric vehicle. If you have a plug-in hybrid, you pay half of what the registration fee is. So that money we are diverting to a really great program in the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, which is looking at ways to help multi-unit uh, owners and renters in multi-unit dwellings to get charging at their
Hmm.
place of residence, which has been a challenge because a lot of people who live in a multi-unit apartment building or something wind up having to publicly charge, which is much more expensive. And if you have an electric vehicle, Green Mountain Power will give you a charger. You have to pay for the installation. You have to pay for the electricity work. So it's a lot cheaper, and there are cheaper rates if you um, charge after between the 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock the next afternoon. So,
Mhm.
so that just felt like a couple of things that we could do to sort of move at least. And the other thing that we were trying to do is, in terms of the climate caucus, is hold the line because there were a number of bills that wanted to repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act,
Mm, mhm.
repeal the Affordable Heat Act. I don't know if you remember that controversy.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't specifically out of the Transportation Committee, but in the Climate Solutions Caucus, our goal was just to hold the line this year because we knew that wasn't anything major we could do. Um, and then right towards the end of the session, a couple of years ago, the Agency of Natural Resources had put in by rule the California Clean Cars, Clean Trucks rule, which meant that this is what we did exactly what California has been doing, is by 20 start to any it's up to the manufacturer, not the dealerships, to provide Vermont with a certain percentage of all electric cars by 2030. It's like 35%. I think it was going to be for 2026. I can't remember all the numbers, so don't quote
Okay.
me on that. This is the general. And so there
And
was
just so make sure I heard you correctly when you talk about the manufacturers, they needed to make sure that dealers could have on the lot for people to look at and
exactly,
consider all electric vehicles, and
exactly.
you wanted to make sure there was
Yeah,
enough of a variety for people to choose from.
right. And some of the
Gotcha.
dealers were starting to push back on that. We had some testimony
Hmm.
that uh, for various reasons. And one of the bigger things was that the big trucks. So there was clean cars, ACC, advanced clean cars, ACC and ACC2, ACCT, and ACC. They're different, but anyway, they were what the California does. It's to try to move the market on electric vehicles.
Gotcha.
That you would provide them so that there was a certain percentage that needed to be met every year until 2035.
Hmm.
And and it was fine. It seemed to be working fine with the cars. There were also rules different percentages for trucks, and especially for the big trucks, like think about a milk hauler or something like that. And those people came in and testified that they just didn't have the charging infrastructure. They couldn't get their milk truck to Boston and back. And there
Mm,
was a bill in our committee that a member of our committee had put in. And meanwhile, sort of the legislature or the leadership in the legislature decided that we didn't want the legislature to do that. It came from these rules were promulgated by the administration and they had the power to change them if they wanted to.
okay.
So unfortunately, so the speaker, leadership wrote a letter to the administration saying,
And when you say administration, you mean Scott administration.
yes,
Okay.
sorry, yeah. But our leadership, Democratic leadership,
Hmm.
the speaker wrote a letter to the governor's office saying, we think that you should delay because Massachusetts and I think Maryland started delaying the years by which this would have to happen. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but that so they wrote the letter to the governor saying Massachusetts and Maryland have pulled back a little bit. We think you should hold off just on the heavy trucks.
Okay.
And they went to the governor to ask for that. The governor said, well, I think I'm just going to do everything,
Hmm.
which was really a bummer. So that means
Oh,
that the cars and the trucks and the light duty trucks and the heavy duty trucks are all sort of on a pause until I think it's 2027. I'm not sure.
okay.
So, there's just been a lot of um, backsliding, I guess I should
Hmm.
say, in the world of addressing
Hmm.
carbon emissions.
Well, what you said about some legislation to pull back on like the Global Solutions Warming Act and some of the other previous legislation or existing legislation now, I should say. I find that interesting because when I had Laura Sibilia on a few weeks ago, who serves on, I'm not
Energy and
going to,
technology.
thank you, Energy and
Yeah.
Technology Committee, her committee saw similar bills.
Well,
Um,
those bills came to her committee, actually.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. But they were, so I think I'm trying to make a distinction between like what came to our transportation committee. That was a bill about the clean trucks, clean cars, clean trucks.
Ah,
But their committee saw those bills because they were more general and more energy related.
mm-hmm,
And in the Climate Caucus, Climate Solutions Caucus, which deals with not just transportation, but the whole landscape of carbon emissions, thermal. That was the Affordable Heat Act was a bill. There was a bill to repeal that. And that came to Laura's committee, and Laura was very, very uh, good spokesperson for that Affordable Heat Act. I don't know.
mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Well,
just-
Laura, when she went through, she and I have talked about this, when she went through Irene and saw how many of her communities were shut off and cut off and couldn't communicate with the outside world. She took that very seriously. And I think it's really governed some of her decisions around energy and
yeah.
technology. Yeah.
Yeah, and Laura has been also really good about broadband.
Hmm.
Bringing broadband. Yeah, she's an outstanding legislator. Really value her. Uh, I was going to say something, and now I've totally
Oh, I'm
forgotten what I was
sorry.
going to say. That's all right.
Climate caucus, transportation,
Yeah,
climate change legislation.
yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Is it actually one of the reasons, and say the Affordable Heat Act, we're trying to get people in off of fossil fuels because fossil fuels are volatile. And if we can have cleaner energy, it not only it helps the environment, it helps air quality, which is another, it's carbon emissions, which is, dealing with the atmosphere. It's air quality, which deals with all these bad gases, NOx and VOx, no, nitrous ox, I forget all the names. There are these acronyms, NOx and VOx, and bad for people with asthma.
Hmm.
And then it also helps people have lower heating bills and lower transportation costs. And transportation, lower income people are highly, it's called transportation burdened,
Hmm.
energy burdened, because they have to, a lot of low income people live far away from work. They're driving old cars that are not necessarily fuel efficient, et cetera. So all of these programs are not only for the environment, but they're also to help people have affordability and have an affordable transportation, affordable heat, et cetera. So it's interesting that, sort of in terms of, I mean, I would say that the Scott administration has been on board with that as long as there was money, but it could have been more, I would say, push, because that's the governor's message, is affordability.
Mm,
And
yeah.
we can get into that when we talk about H91. The this is a segue into the homeless, the bill to address the homelessness. Anyway, so
I made a note.
yeah, so I guess I just wanted to make that point, is
Hmm.
that a lot of, I mean, people were saying, oh, electric vehicles, they're just it's just an elite thing. But a lot of people with the incentives that we had were able to buy electric vehicles and are, at maybe half price
Hmm.
because of the different incentives. And it makes a big difference.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point, Molly, because a lot of the concerns I've heard around some of the state's efforts around climate change and introducing these new technologies is concerns about how much they cost to get into them. Like if you have a oil burner in your house, replacing that, like how much that will cost. But there's also some concern about how well they do in Vermont's colder climates, and whether they're reliable. There's a lot of concerns around that too. Um, so affordability and reliability, I think, are the two things I tend to hear
Mhm.
people worry about. I'm curious, along with affordability, did reliability, has that ever come before either the climate
Well,
caucus or transportation committee?
a little bit. I mean, there's the issue of, if your power goes out, I mean, that's a big issue.
Hmm.
But there's not, if your power goes out, you don't have an oil furnace either, you know.
Hmm.
So, and there are newer brands of heat pumps that go to lower temperature,
Okay.
you know. And there's also weatherization.
Hmm.
So, and there are incentives for low income weatherization anyway.
Which,
So,
which I think a lot of folks who are talking about affordability and energy say start with weatherization
right,
and then
right.
go
It's the
on to the
first
other
thing to do.
things.
Tighten up your house. Uh,
Hmm.
but it's complicated. Heating a house in winter is very complicated. We have like three different sources of heat for our houses. No one, not all at the same time, but for different purposes. So anyway,
Hmm. Hmm. Um, we have just about 5 minutes before we're going to hear
okay.
from some underwriters. So, is there anything left regarding work you did on the Climate Caucus or on the Transportation Committee you want to remind people of?
Um, there was an interesting thing that happened in transportation at the very, and I don't know, it's going to be hard to explain. At the very end of the year, is that there was a something came to our committee. Well, there was a bill that was put forth by a senator that got incorporated into the transportation bill,
Hmm.
and the Senate took our transportation bill. So when we went to conference with I mean, I know you know the whole process, maybe not all the listeners do, but once
Yeah,
it gets past
please
the
explain.
Senate, then the House, we have to agree if they have a different version. And there was a provision in there to give towns, it sounded sort of innocuous, to give the towns the authority to maintain public trails.
Hmm.
And is that what they call it? Forget the title, the exact official title. But there are about 500 different trails in Vermont that are public trails. They're old roads that are discontinued, but they're still public. And one of them, interestingly enough, there's one in Brattleboro, and it's Minshaw Street. And it's a little street that goes from Canal Street up behind the SD Oregon buildings up to Oregon Street.
Yeah, and if you
And
don't
that,
know it's there, you don't see
yeah,
it. Yeah,
but it
yeah.
is a path. And I think a lot of people, and I'm sure in the days of Esther Organ, I'm sure a lot of people from Estyville walk down that path to go to work. So, anyway, so there has been a lawsuit brought by somebody, a Vermont Law School professor who moved to Stratford and bought some property in Tunbridge and was surprised that one time, knew there was a public trail there, was surprised that one time there was a bike, somebody was putting up signs for a bike race. And it was
Mm,
one of those once a year things for raising money for something. And he just sort of was like, "What do you mean? This is, you know?" And so he brought a lawsuit against the town, and it's been going on and on and on. And it has to do with who has the authority to maintain the trails. So the 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 litigant thinks that it's his responsibility to maintain the trails because the trail's on his property, but it's not his property. It's
mm,
public. And uh the town maintains that it's the town's. Anyway, it came to this, it came to the when we were conferencing, and we hadn't had enough testimony on it. So we said, look, they were voting for it. We said, look, let's put it in the motor vehicle bill. There are two main bills that we do in transportation: the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill that starts in the Senate and the transportation bill that starts in the House. So when it came time to finish up the motor vehicle bill, we put it in there. At that point, the Senate had sort of changed their minds a little bit. And anyway, it got very complex. And because of this lawsuit, some people said, well, they didn't want to interfere in a lawsuit. My feeling was we're a separate branch of government. We can make our own decision. We
mhm.
don't have to wait for a lawsuit. They can decide whatever. So we put it in, but we put it in that it wasn't going to go into effect until I think it's April next year. Anyway, it was very interesting. The League of Cities and Towns were very much on the side of the towns and came in and testified, and they had legal testimony with going back with statutes that gave, because somehow this never got actually officially written into statute, which sort of shows you how important language is in statute.
Mm,
And it just didn't say maintain. It said you could lay out trails, they could do this and that, but it didn't say maintain. And
mhm.
that's the whole crux of this argument. And I don't think it's going away. I think that the court just wrote a letter to our committee chair saying, now that you've voted on this, oh, they just let them know that they wrote to the parties and said, do you think that this still needs to be decided by the court since the legislature? So we'll see where that goes. But it was sort of a thing that got me very interested. We had Jeff Nugent from Wyndham Regional Planning, who's the
Mhm.
map maker there, testified by Zoom, and a few other people talking about the importance of these public trails and there are a bunch of them all over the state. Like I said, like 570 or something that are all over the place. And it just made me, think about accessibility of land versus private property. And certainly, people, you want to know that your property is your property, but those are already like have been laid out before, and
Mm.
they need to remain public so that the public can enjoy them. And some of them are in beautiful places, and some of them are a odd little thing that goes up behind the SD Organ buildings in Brattleboro. Now, now we'll have people trooping up Minshaw Street to check it out.
to to use the public right away.
Public right away. Yeah.
Oh, well, interesting. Thank you. And you said that ended up in the transportation bill or the motor
It went
vehicle
the
bill?
miscellaneous motor vehicle bill S-123.
Okay.
And it's just a few sentences, about the right of towns to maintain the, I forget exactly the language.
Okay.
Anyway, so that was just a little thing. Like you said, people never know about all the little things that happen. And that was a
Ex-
little thing, but it was a really big thing because it affected a lot of different towns that have public trails.
yeah. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up, Molly, because you're right. It's about, like you said, access and given the state's focus right now on outdoor recreation and the outdoor recreation economy
Exactly. People
and
brought
things
that
like
point
the
up. Yeah.
Lamoille Vale Rail Trail and stuff
Yes.
like that, yeah, I can see how this is an issue.
And the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail was funded with transportation dollars. A lot of it. We had that was part of our discussion in our bill every year to contribute because originally it was the vast people were coming and putting money
Right.
into that, and they came to the state and said, "Look, we can't do this anymore. Would you want to partner with us?" And it's been a very good partnership.
Hmm. Yeah, and I hope sometime I get to see the trail because I've heard so
Me
many people talk
too. I
about it.
know.
And it's
Every
like,
summer I say I'm going to get on the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail.
do
Um,
the whole 90, what is it, 98 miles, 93 miles?
yeah, something like that. Yeah, some neighbors just did some sections of it, and there are places you could stop, and you could.
Hmm.
I think in Hyde Park, there's a brewery. There's some places to stay along the way. It's a really neat thing. Of course, what's sad is that there's no more railroad that goes from St. Johnsbury to Swanton.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
would be nice
yeah,
if we had our interrail.
right.
But on that note, we do need to hear from some underwriters. So, folks, stay tuned. Mollie Burke and I will be right back. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the second half of the Montpelier Happy Hour here on WVEW LP Brattleboro. If you're just joining us, I'm Olga Peters, the host and producer of the show, and I'm talking with Representative Mollie Burke from Wyndham 8, and that is the southeast part of Brattleboro, I think we decided, and she's one of three reps from the town of Brattleboro. And in the first half, we talked about some of the climate change work she has done over the years and how things have shifted a little bit. And in the second half, we'll be revisiting some of the bigger pieces of legislation that went through the session. Um, Quick housekeeping. I want to thank BCTV for taking the video version of our show and sharing it with media centers in Vermont, and remind people that the views and opinions of those on the happy hour are those of the host and the guests and no one else. Just no one else. Not the platforms,
I,
not our bosses, not the rest of the legislature, not our house
I don't
plans.
have I don't have an AI little voice in my ear saying, "Say this, say that."
That is a good thing. We're happy about that, Mollie. Thank you. So, Mollie, I'd like to take just a couple minutes to hear some of your thoughts on the education bill that has gotten a lot of coverage this session. So we won't, dive into the details, but you did decide in the end to vote no on it. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts on what brought you to that decision.
Well, I voted no, but there's no actual record that I voted no, which is, I don't know if you know what happened at the end. That,
No, I don't think I do.
oh, well, we were ready. We were discussing the bill. Last Monday, we were brought back to Montpelier because it took a while for the conference committees to agree. Finally, they agreed, and we came back on last Monday, the 16th. And
Hmm.
we had a few other bills to take care of. And then at the end of the day, we were discussing 454, the H 454, the major education transformation bill. And there was a procedural, someone got up and, which had happened in the Senate earlier in the day, got up and said that this bill was actually not germane because during the conference committee, new issues had been brought in that were not part of the original legislation. So that's
Oh,
conference committee. But that was voted down. They,
okay.
or they said it wasn't germane, but you can override being not being germane by is it two-thirds or is it a majority vote? I can't remember that. Anyway, you can override it. Let's say
There's a
that.
process to do that.
Yes, there's a process to do that, and that was overridden. So I think people were a little bit thrown off. And then the speaker said, "All right, well now we're considering the bill." And usually, they read the bill, and usually there's like somebody will get up and stand up to talk about it, or stand up to make a roll call, or there'll be a bunch of people talking, and then somebody will call for a roll call on a bill as consequential as this
Yeah.
somehow. And I haven't gone back to watch, but other people say that they feel that it wasn't like the speaker rushed into it. And all of a sudden, there was nobody said anything. And the speaker said, all those in favor, say aye. And all those opposed, no. So nobody had a opportunity for a roll call to be on record as to how they voted. And
Interesting.
and then afterwards, people are like, well, what just happened? How did this happen? And you can only call a bill back if you voted yes on the measure. Like you can't. So somebody would have liked to have said, let's do it again, but that person voted no, and so then it was determined that the next question was, shall the bill be sent to the governor? So that was sort of like a proxy. They called a roll call on that, which is like a proxy for how you would have voted on the ed bill. So that is on record, but it's a little bit weird. And there were some emails afterwards from people saying this was rushed. Some people felt that it was deliberate. I don't believe that.
Hmm.
And a lot of people said, no, if you go back and watch it, it was just that people were asleep or something. I don't know.
Burned out?
It was very strange.
Hmm.
That's where we are. And so I did vote no by voice, and I did vote no to not send it to the governor. That's on record. And I voted no for a variety of reasons. I had really struggled with this bill a lot, and in fact, I went to the state house on Monday, the day we were supposed to vote, and I was still on the fence. But I knew that the NEA was opposed to it, and I had gotten emails from people in my district asking me to not vote for it, and I didn't get any emails saying please vote for it.
Hmm.
And I am concerned about our small schools. And when you are part of a larger district and that district has a whole board, and the board could decide that your school is the one to close instead of you making the decision. It's very complicated. It's complicated because we have local control. People love their local schools. Local schools are the heart of communities. And if a local school leaves a community, it's sort of not many people are going to want to move to that community. And we're
Hmm.
also trying to attract young families to Vermont. And if we have the housing, our child care bill, which is sort of getting a little bit off topic, but this great child care bill that we passed last year,
Yeah.
and been a really great, uh, I think, can be a great incentive to help encourage young families to move to Vermont because it's a very excellent child care bill that raised the income level that by which people could get a subsidy. It raising pay for child care workers who've been very like distressingly underpaid for years
Hmm.
and help child care centers open up. So anyway, so that's it's all so many things are interrelated. The schools issue, the community issue, the child care issue, the housing issue, everything is interconnected. Anyway, so concerned about that and just in general I didn't it was sort of like, well, we're gonna be able to save money and give an excellent education to everybody. And I asked somebody in a meeting, so what does that mean to give an excellent education to everybody, give everybody the opportunities? And this person said, well, my son goes to this school and they have this and this and this and this program, and I want all schools to have that program. I'm thinking, well, if all schools have the program, it's not going to cost less. It's going to cost more. It costs a lot to have an excellent school. And, there have been a lot of people talking about, we are sort of a quasi income based property taxes, but
Hmm.
there have been um, proposals over the years to show how inequitable that is and how can we do a better job of having people base property taxes based on income and having the people who actually can pay a little bit more. But there's not necessarily an appetite to raise taxes on people either, nor well, the governor is not in favor of doing anything related to taxes. In fact, the governor vetoed the child care bill because it was a brought payroll tax, a very
That's
small
right.
payroll tax, and so short-sighted because it's actually been an economic boom. Well, I don't
Mhm.
know what boom, but it's been economically valuable. And so there's that interrelationship. So anyway, so that's sort of my short answer on the ed bill. There are a lot of contingencies in the bill. We have to see now they're going to be divided. They have a committee that's going to look at how they're going to make whatever 10 school districts or more, I don't know, in the whole state, and what schools are going to get put together with what schools, and that's going to be a real challenge too because we're going
Mhm.
to vote on that next year, and I think that is going to be extremely contentious.
That's where things will really, right now, things still feel kind of nebulous
Yeah,
because the
but the
work hasn't
stage is
begun.
set. The stage is set, but
Yep.
nothing major has happened.
Hmm.
So, we'll see. And I'm sure you've talked to Emily about this, or you will talk to Emily about this, and she's front and center with that bill and did a fabulous job negotiating with the Senate to get more of what the House wanted, and she's extremely well versed in all the intricacies of the
Hmm.
bill.
Yes, yes, she is. And she has been on the show and talked about it before, but I'm sure she and I will revisit the topic again because it's a big topic and it's one of those topics that is economic and emotional and community based. And I mean, it hits every part of Vermont life. So, yeah, we're not done talking about the Ed
Yeah.
Bill. But I appreciate you sharing your thoughts about how you came to make the vote you did. I think I hope listeners appreciate that. Um, and yeah, thank you for that, Molly. In the previous um, section before the break, you had mentioned H91, which is the bill to replace the motel hotel emergency housing program with a longer strategic approach to getting people back into housing, which the governor vetoed. I think it's 2 weeks ago now. Um, I'm wondering, are there thoughts there that you want to share? What was your thoughts on the bill?
Well, I was a strong supporter of the bill. I had been following the bill. I had an intern this year, wonderful UVM intern, and I had put her on the case to, follow the conversations around this bill and write me some, up what was happening. And that committee, which has a wonderful chair, Teresa Wood, worked on that bill all session. All
Mm-hmm.
session, they worked on that bill because it's been so hard. We've struggled with the governor around the motel program, and these evictions are really awful to to feel. There's going to be another round of evictions on June 30th if
From
nothing
the
happens.
motel hotel program.
And it's obviously that the motel program is not the best solution, but it's the best solution if you have no other option. If you are the other option is living in a tent or living, under a bridge or something like that. So um, so that I was very strong supporter of it, and it was like a little bit of an interesting thing is that there are some people in town who were not in favor of it and
Mm-hmm.
felt that it was going to increase the number. Did not believe that this was really an effort to wind down the motel program because there was going to be a lot of supervision, a lot of case management around and putting the onus for that on the community action agencies who were happy to take on that role, had the capacity to take on that role, and could help people with their housing much more so than what the administration has been able to provide or not provide. So it's a real shame that the governor, for whatever reason, and he doesn't have a plan. We've asked the governor for years, could you come up, what's your plan? but we don't, and they don't have a plan. And in fact, the chair of the committee who worked so hard on that bill, I was at a meeting with her, and she said that after the veto, the administration said to her, "Well, we'd like to work with you to do something." She was like, "I've been trying to work with you."
You had a whole session.
Yeah. So I think it was another example of, and I'm going to say this publicly, I feel that the governor, he's got a lot of good qualities, done a lot of good things, but he's very, his um, ability to envision things or to look at things in a wider perspective is very limited. He's very
Mm,
limited. So uh, it's all about, and he talks about affordability and protecting the most vulnerable. But who are the most vulnerable people? The people who don't have homes.
mhm.
And I want to give a lot of credit to Brenda Siegel for her work with homeless people and her advocacy, and also this other organization, BAA, what is it, Vermont? There's another acronym for this Frank Kanak, who's the head of it. I can't remember the name of another housing advocacy organization, not in Brattleboro, but in the state.
Mhm.
And
I am forgetting what the acronym stands for too,
yeah,
so I'm sorry I'm not
BAA,
chiming in.
yeah, there's so many acronyms floating around in my world anyway.
Keep talking. I will look it up while you're
Yeah.
talking.
So what can I say? It's been vetoed, and I don't know what the path forward is. I don't know what's going to happen. And it appears that the governor is not willing to extend anything in the motels. The people in the motels now are families and people with disabilities. Everybody else is gone. So what do we do? What's going to happen? What's Putney Road going to look like when all these people have to, where do they go? Some people need electricity to plug in medical devices. Some
Yeah.
people are in wheelchairs. And I feel that no, and I was talking to somebody recently who has, I would say quite a bit of means and said, well, we just can't afford it. And I was just like, we can. We have to. We have to afford it. And in a way that doesn't burden other very low income people who are also struggling.
Hmm.
And there certainly are a lot of people in Vermont who are just struggling to make ends meet, just struggling to keep their apartment or keep their house, keep their cars. So I'm not dismissing that at all, but there's a whole continuum of need. And if we can't address those needs, what are we doing as a society and as a state if we can't take care of the most vulnerable and if we can't create an affordable place for people to live as well. So,
Thank you, Molly. Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont.
yes, HH, Housing and Homeless Alliance, HHAV. Yeah.
Yes.
It sounds like HVAC or something.
It looks a little bit like that on the screen, but yes, Housing and uh, Alliance of Homelessness Alliance of Vermont. Um, I think bills like H91 um, and the whole issue of affordability. I've often said on this show that when you say something like affordability, everyone nods. Yeah, everybody wants things to be affordable. But I don't know as a state if we've ever sat down and defined what that means.
Mhm.
Uh, so so when we're building our policy, the governor can still hold one thought in his head what affordability means, and the legislature can have another thought. But bills like H91, I always feel a little sorry for them because it's very easy to quantify how much they're going to cost as far as like implementing the bill
Mhm.
and how much money is being appropriated to whatever the bill puts in place. But it's not as easy to quantify what happens if we don't have the bill and how much that costs.
Yeah.
It's hard to quantify human suffering. It's hard to quantify, you know, without this bill, now Groundworks is spending X amount. It's that gets so nebulous that if the governor is just looking at dollars and cents, he can, there they are in H91 kind of spelled out. Um,
mental health costs. If people don't have a roof over their head, it impacts their mental health.
Yeah. But those are the costs that are harder to quantify. So it can feel like we're saving money when actually we probably aren't. Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
We have just about 5 minutes left, Molly, before I need to let you go. And before we go, though, I would love to hear your thoughts. As someone who has worked really hard around climate change, and even an issue that brought you to where you are now as a lawmaker, we're working in a federal structure right now under the Trump administration where certain words have become taboo, and climate change is one of them. And money to put to climate change has become taboo, and all these things. What is that like trying to do your work when you're technically not allowed, I'm putting that in quotes, air quotes, um, to say the word climate change?
Well, fortunately, we still can in Vermont, and that's one thing. The other thing is that we just need to persevere. I've long been a fan, disciple of Bill McKibben, and he's always got some optimistic way of dealing with things. I mean, every once in a while he'll say this is a pretty dark day, but it's we can't afford to just sort of throw in the towel and just say, oh well. It boggles my mind that there are obviously people, very intelligent people in Congress, who are willing to just throw this all away. They know it's real. And they're so beholden to the president who has such a uh, makes decisions based on retribution and his feelings about things, not on scientific evidence. And just so many things just are so wrong and are so detrimental to people. I mean, taking away FEMA, making states pay for FEMA. Who's gonna, how are we gonna do that when we have a disaster, which inevitably we're going to have more and more floods in Vermont. We're going to have, because as we reach that 1.5, I think we've already maybe gotten to that threshold, the 1.5 Celsius threshold that the Paris Accords were trying to keep us from. It's uh, we are headed for whatever the predictions have been. A hotter, oh, today is going to be 96. It's not that there were never uh, days that were in the 90s in Vermont, but not the norm. And of course, we know, what was it recently? That was the hottest, I don't know, April or May or something. I can't remember. There's so many different ways of looking at this. So I just feel that it's important not to be discouraged and
Mhm.
to sort of try to think, where can you make a difference and how can you push back? And it gets down to the ballot box. Joe Biden did a really great, he did the most climate legislation of any president ever with the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, not only for climate, but also for jobs, creating, factories that are making solar panels and batteries and all that kind of thing. And it's all tied together, that if we can grow our economy and have a good economy with well-paying jobs, but also doing the right thing environmentally. So I refuse to get discouraged, and I just feel like you just have to keep pushing where we can push and do what we can do.
Mollie Burke, Wyndham 8 representative. So glad you could join us today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on the session. And if people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
The best way is by email. And should I just speak my email? It's my initial M Burke, last name Burke, at leg.state.vt.us. And if you don't have a way to write that down, you can look up on the legislative website, look up my legislative address, and that's the best way to reach me. And although I always enjoy talking to you, it's very much a pleasure. So great to
Oh,
see you.
thank you. Great to see you too. And on that note, we're going to head out here on the Montpelier Happy Hour. Just a reminder, we air every Friday on WVEW Brattleboro, where we broadcast it on Wednesday mornings, wherever you find your podcasts. And I'm so sorry, I'm still dealing with some technical issues that have hung up some of my back episodes. So if you see back episodes suddenly coming into your podcast feed, give me a little cheer because it means I figured out the technical issue.
Love
On
those
that,
technical issues.
what's that?
Love those technical issues, right?
They always love to sneak up on you. But on that note, everyone, have a great weekend.